All right, so in this series of videos, I've decided to show some PC disassembly, and ironically or coincidentally, the PC I'm about to disassemble is the same model Dell that this gentleman named Lucas Hinch in Colorado Springs, Colorado, has been on the news going viral for being frustrated in putting 9mm bullets into it. Well, I'm going to disassemble it in a more satisfying way this time around. You've seen me shoot and blow up computers before, but when I get an old machine like this in, I like to take the opportunity to fully disassemble it completely. Every single screw I see, I will take out. And I recommend, if you're just getting started in computers and you want to learn more about how they work, see if you can't find a computer really cheaply at Goodwill or someplace like that for $5 or $10, or even Craigslist. You may even see them sitting out in a, to be thrown away in the trash. And if you do, I recommend you do what I'm doing here, and that is, don't try to fix it and make it work. That's pointless. The machine's too old to be useful unless somebody's really knowledgeable with Linux or something like that and can turn it into some kind of a Linux server or something, but or whatever they want to run on Linux. But if you're just learning computers, a great way to learn is to take it apart to see how it works. Now, there's a fancy word for that. It's called reverse engineering. And all it is a fancy way of saying we're going to take it apart to see how it works. I assure you, if somebody put it together, someone else can take it apart. Now, as you can see, I've got my big DeWalt screwdriver because I wasn't fooling around. And I'm just, at this point, I'm removing every cable and every screw, and there I'm just punching out the back plates to the PCI slots. Now, those back PCI slot covers can be reused. The screws that you take out, a lot of the hex head and thin thread screws that are used for mounting a lot of the components, such as the hard drive, can be reused. You can keep those as spare screws to use when you're building your own system or working on somebody else's system. And what I've done here is I've cut the audio to this and replaced it with this narrative, because all you're really hearing throughout it is the noise of the screwdriver motor and then me cursing a lot as I'm trying to figure out how it comes apart. Now, generally speaking, the computers that are built by the big name manufacturers like Dell and HP, for example, have these proprietary case designs that are very difficult to work on, let alone upgrade or repair. You might be wondering what the screws were I was removing right there on that cover. Though that is where they hide the extra screws. If you wanted to add another hard drive, you'd have to know to look there to find those extra screws. I imagine many of these computers have been disposed where those screws have never been touched. I would probably estimate 99% of the case. The technicians working on them or the places where they were used did not know that those screws existed there as spares. You have to take the front cover off to find them. Even on the floppy drive I've just removed and on the optical drive I've just removed, there are screws that stick out that function as a way of mounting uniquely in the Dell case. Those screws are not reusable whatsoever unless you're going to reuse it in a similar styled Dell case. But, and later on, I'll show you an HP I'll take apart, and then I'll take apart like one I've built. So you can see the difference in how long it takes me to completely and fully disassemble it down to absolutely, every single component. And I think you'll find that this Dell is one of the worst ones to work on. And I say that because the way that they've got the cabling and the hardware designed inside of the case is it's not very manufacturing smart, which you'll see a little later on here, but it's also not smart as far as an assembly line process. It's far too complex to move through an assembly line quickly. And this video, I want to reiterate here, I'm going to play this video at normal speed, and there may be places where I skip through some parts if, like here I'm trying to figure something out and you can't see what I'm doing. If there's a spot like that where I'm doing that for 10 minutes, I'll skip forward on that. I have to destroy these computers. Actually, I have to in order to write them off my taxes. The government requires that they are destroyed. It's just a common procedure here in the States. Obviously, it could have been donated if it was working, but it's not working and it's not worth fixing, so you can just write it off and destroy it. Now, even to take that power supply out, there's a little button all the way in the back I have to push. It's not really a button, but a tab, a metal tab. You have to push that in after taking out the 4 screws, and then the power supply comes out. It seems a little redundant to have both in place, but again, something you won't see on a home build. This is only something you'll get from a major manufacturer like Dell or HP. You know, a mass-produced assembly line manufacturing process where the computers are being shipped all over the world. The engineers probably put that little tab in just to give that power supply a little extra strength in shipping. That's the only thing I can imagine. Now, they don't use traditional heat sinks and fans on these Dells. This is a giant heat sink, and then the fan is up on the front of the computer instead of resting on top of the CPU like you're accustomed to seeing in my builds. So Dell takes a different approach to cooling. It's no more or less effective, I guess. Dell engineers are pretty much the same engineers with the same education as what Intel hires to design their cooling solutions for their CPUs. So again, it's just I think it's more inefficient. It takes up more room in the case, and it's a bigger, heavier heat sink because the fan is not directly on top of it. The fan is in the front, and there's an air duct that directs the air being brought in from the fan over that heat sink. To me, it's a very inefficient design. It does work. Now I'm going to struggle with trying to figure out how to get this front fan out. Now again, that front fan on the systems I build is optional. But on this system, it's absolutely critical that front fan is working, or the CPU heatsink is not going to have airflow, and you're going to have a heat-related problem. So here I'm still sort of figuring my way around this case. Now, I've seen this case many, many times over the years, but I don't memorize how they come apart, especially the detail with which you have to go to get this far into it. So that's why you will see me sort of struggle and look and try and find the logic to it. And again, this is a great way for you to learn. You don't have to worry about breaking anything because you're taking a computer that either is already broken or has no value anyway. You've got nothing to lose. You can keep the screws, as I mentioned, for future work, or at least some of the screws that fit the standards. And you get to see how it all comes together in a assembly line process that the large manufacturers used and compare it with something you build yourself. A lot of people ask me, is it cheaper to build one yourself or is it cheaper to buy one made? And I think if you look and see what you get with one that's pre-made, especially one you just buy randomly off the shelf at your local electronics store, there's no comparison to what you could build yourself. Now, when you go to the specialty builders for the high-end gaming rigs, there's a huge savings for building it yourself. But I don't know that we're really comparing apples to apples, pardon the pun, when you're saying, would it have been cheaper for me to build a computer than this Dell at the time when this Dell was purchased new? And usually the answer is yes. If not, it's typically about the same price. But the difference is the computer that you build will be upgradable, and you won't have to struggle so much with doing any upgrades, repairs, or in its final days, the disassembly is what I'm doing here. And you'll see that. You'll see how long this takes for me to disassemble. And then you'll see how long it takes for me to disassemble the HP and how long it takes for me to disassemble the system I built many years ago. And I'll just let that speak for itself. The systems that I'm building, the systems I'm disassembling, I am not familiar with any of them, so I sort of have to look at them and figure it out as I go. You can see I finally figured out how to get that front fan off, and now I'm trying to pull the fan out of its shroud. As you can see, I want to take when I say I want to take this apart, I want to take every single thing apart that comes apart. If two pieces go together, I want those pieces separated, unless, as in the case of this Dell case, things are riveted. So like the other side panel on this Dell case is riveted, and the top is also riveted. And you'll see I actually struggle with trying to remove the spring mechanism that releases the side panel, which is how you open up and work on this style of Dell case. And actually gave myself a little injury when I did it. Nothing major, but you can see I'm struggling. I had to go in for another tool. What did I go in for? I went in for wire cutters there. And I know what I'm doing right now. There's these little rubber, I don't know what you'd call them. I'm sure they have a name. And they're used instead of screws. They go through the holes in the shroud and the fan so that the fan can vibrate around and move without making any noise or rattling around in the case, which it would do if it were held in with screws. So instead they use these rubber pieces. I'm sure someone will tell me what they're called. And they're used in place of screws. And of course over time those things will dry up and just naturally break. Especially here in the desert, they dry up pretty bad. Those were actually in pretty good shape considering the age of the computer. Now, Dells, I don't know what it is with Dells, but they like to put springs in their computer. And no computer I've ever hand-built has a spring in it, not ever. But this case has two springs, one for the top latch to release the side panel and one for that blue thing you see around the drive cage that lowers to make it's their own proprietary way of inserting and removing drives easier. I found a couple more screws that could come off, so it looks like I can pull the face off of this thing now that I see those screws are out. And removing the screws wasn't even enough. Again, there's so much redundancy in this case. I would say it's safe to say this case was over-engineered. There was no reason those screws needed to be put on that front cover. You can see I cannot get that front cover off for the life of me, despite having removed those screws. So the screws were redundant. Again, Dell is packing these things up and shipping them out all over the world, so I imagine the logic at the time must have been, we want this thing to have the greatest chance of survival of shipping. But I think Dell learned that over-engineering that case cost them too much money. The assembly line process was taking too long because of the complexity of the case. And then, of course, the owners were getting upset at having to do any maintenance on the case or work on the case or within the case, which is why some people might want to take it out and shoot it. So here I'm removing a spring. It's so weird to see a spring in a computer. I don't know. It's just puzzling to me. But leave it to Dell. Leave it to the big manufacturers to make some proprietary way of doing something simple much more complicated. But that's what they do. And that's why when you compare, if you built the same computer as this, same specs, and you said, well, okay, are they the same price? You wouldn't be putting it in a case that's this difficult to work on. And that in and of itself is worth something in value, even if the computers that you're comparing have the same cost or there's a $5 or $10 difference between them. You've got to consider that. How hard is it going to be to work on this in the future? And you can see I'm really struggling with this top piece. There's a sliding mechanism, and it's between two pieces of metal on the case. And those pieces of metal are riveted, and I'm figuring that out right now. That's actually done during the assembly, the manufacturing process of the case itself. This is done. Now I'm back to trying to figure out how this front cover comes back off. And, it's just like one thing after the other I'm being stumped on, where any ordinary case that you would buy at the store or buy online, whatever, to build your own computer would not be this difficult. You wouldn't see me struggle like this with any other case that was designed to have a motherboard put into it by by a company that sells cases. This company does, Dell doesn't sell cases, so it doesn't matter to Dell whether or not their case is upgradable or easy to work on. They're selling you a computer, just a whole pre-made computer. If you don't like it, tough luck. It's sort of the attitude of all the big makers, Dells and HPs. There's not a lot of customization, or when you get into the customization, that's where it really gets expensive, and that's where building your own even becomes more obviously less expensive. So here I'm still finding all the rivets. I see that this top cover somehow comes off, and I'm sorry, the top cover doesn't. It's the sliding mechanism I'm looking at right now. What's interesting about this, not only is this educational, it's a bit of a challenge because you reverse engineering it. You're taking apart a puzzle instead of putting a puzzle together. But in doing so, it helps you understand why it was put together that way. So as I struggle to figure out how to get this mechanism out, and I'm trying to figure out what's holding the front bezel on. Okay, so it's about at this point where I just realize I'm going to need to get another tool. Yep, there it goes. So I'm going to go grab a straight edge screwdriver, and I just put a quick edit in right there, so no sense watching nothing while I'm gone. And I figured out if I push that tab in on the top and on the side there, I'm now getting progress on removing that front fascia from the computer, and I'm turning it around here so you can see what I'm doing. No computer should be this difficult to take apart. No home computer should. I mean, maybe if it's a server or it has a special, it serves a special purpose, a proprietary purpose, such as in automotive manufacturing where you've got the computers that control the robots and such. I could give it some understanding, some justification. But it's just not justified to have it be this difficult. But again, the experience you get from taking apart the machine will help you understand why it was put together the way it was, and why it's limited in the way it's limited, and why a lot of people have bad things to say about them. Yay, I got my front cover off, stick that in the pile with the rest. So I'm looking at what are now rivets, and I'm not going to go through the effort of trying to drill the rivets out. I'm not that passionate. But anything that can be easily removed or even easily broken off, I'm going to do, with the intention that it was something that was removable. Okay, such as in the example here, I'm trying to pull off this top cover. And the top cover, I'm trying to do it without damaging it, even though this is all going to go in the trash. I'm trying to figure out how it comes up, and I believe I broke a few plastic pieces on it, pulling that top off. It's a plastic cover. It absolutely serves no purpose whatsoever other than aesthetics. And then what's below that plastic cover are two pieces of metal that are sandwiched together with a sliding bar in between. And you pull on that sliding bar, and that's what releases the mechanism that holds the side panel on, the one removable side panel. Now the thing I just pulled off there is the front USB and audio, which is all contained on this little circuit board. I see another screw on there, so I'm going to take that screw out. Again, every single screw. And really, it's not only about being thorough, or a job well done, if you will, with regards to building, but also in disassembly, it helps you get a more thorough understanding. If you just took the computer and you took the motherboard out of it, and you didn't go any further than that, the only person you're hurting is yourself. This is a great opportunity to take every single screw out to get the best understanding possible of how this machine, or how it was put together, why it was put together that way, as I've already mentioned. And it will help you when you come across another machine like this out in the field that you need to repair, or when somebody asks you, why should I buy one from you if you're going to try selling them one, versus buy one from the major manufacturers. Well, an ordinary person, why would they care? Because an ordinary person is not going to open it up and work on it If you're the tech, you're the one who's got to deal with this nonsense, not the person who bought it. But you're also the one who has to break the bad news to them when you say, I'm sorry, the power supply in here won't support another hard drive. I'm sorry, the case won't support putting in a USB 3.0 card to make it current. The motherboard won't support adding the amount of memory you want to add. And then so you're the bearer of bad news, and they get all upset about it, and you're like, hey, listen, you're better off, if that's what you want, building one up from scratch, and I'll build you a computer if you want to be able to do that in the future. But if you're looking to do that in the future, don't buy an HP or a Dell or any of the other major name brand manufacturers that have assembly line built computers. Now here I'm still struggling with that sliding piece. There's a plastic handle, and I'm thinking if I bend it back and forth a bunch of times it'll break off. I've just realized it's sandwiched between those two pieces of metal that are riveted. So obviously that is created when the case is being manufactured. And obviously Dell doesn't manufacture the cases in the same place they build the computers. Dell hires somebody to make cases that their engineers have designed. And then those cases are shipped pretty much bare, just completely bare, to Dell. It'll have the front fascia on and everything, but otherwise it'll be empty. And then the Dell assembly line workers will then each put different components in. There'll be somebody who just puts in the motherboard, somebody who just puts in the hard drive, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just now figuring out how to get this sliding piece out. I just want it out. I want to see what it looks like. And again, way over-engineered. 2 screws would have held that side panel on. But instead of using 2 screws, Dell went with folding the metal over, putting a sliding piece of metal in there, putting a spring on it. That's a whole lot of work. Heck, HP only uses 1 screw. I was going to say 2 screws is all you need, but HP does it with 1. Now this can go outside. It's pretty much as fully disassembled as I can make it. So if you're curious, I was looking at the date on the hard drive to see how old the system was, the Dell system. And you could see there's a date of February 2nd, 2006 on the hard drive. So it's 2015 now that I'm doing this, so that computer was 9 years old. All right, so that complete disassembly of the Dell took about 22 minutes and required a couple of tools. Let's disassemble the HP. There's that single screw I'm going to take out to remove the side panel. And you're going to need a T10 Torx bit if you're going to be a computer technician or you own an HP computer, desktop computer that you're going to work on someday. And T10 Torx bits are available pretty much any hardware store that sells tools. So the first thing I'm doing is removing the 2 T10 Torx bits, and then there's a release lever all the way in the back. I'm using the screwdriver to reach it, and you press it in and lift up, and then the whole hard drive cage comes out. And the hard drive cage also contains some kind of expansion bay that HP includes on a lot of the desktops, or they used to anyway. I've never seen anything in one of these expansion bays. And generally the expansion bay is, I believe, USB with a power connector, and I'm just going to remove that so that I just have a piece of bare metal there. And I have to fidget with it a little bit because I don't disassemble HP computers every day, so it's not a regular routine that I'm accustomed to. And it's kind of interesting to see how long it takes to completely disassemble one of these assembly line computers, and the total of how many different types of tools I need to get the job done. There I am getting my wire cutters, another tool I need to cut the zip ties, but that's pretty much going to be needed on just about any computer. And I'm going to remove all of the power connectors now coming from the power supply so that I can take the power supply out. And those levers I'm moving should hold the optical drive in, but something else is holding it in, so I'm going to move on to something else, try and keep this video moving along. Take the video card out, which requires this piece removed off the back that holds all the cards in place. This only has 1 card, just the video card. And one of the first things I'm interested in checking on any video card is the fan. Fans are always the first thing to go out. It's why I choose so many parts that don't have fans where I can. See me flip that? It should spin on its own. It won't spin on its own. That fan is gone. Probably caused an overheating problem with the video card, which is probably why the machine ultimately failed and had to be replaced. Now we're back with the T10 Torx bit again to remove the 4 screws holding the power supply in. And on any other system you build, that's all you need to do to remove the power supply, but not an HP. HP likes those little release levers. So not only do you have to remove these 4 screws, but you've got the release lever to remove, which I'm just now figuring out. And I'm just trying to figure out, why isn't this power supply coming out? And I see the release lever, and I'm just going to go ahead and use my other hand, reach in there, push it in, and pull on the power supply at the same time. And that finally releases the power supply from its imprisonment. And now I'm going to remove all of the connectors across the top of the board. Everything I can see plugged into the motherboard I'm going to remove. Since I'm not putting the system back together, I don't have to remember where they go. And it's a great learning opportunity. If you see old computers laying around, or you have the ability to, or the opportunity to get some old computers, disassemble them. That's the best way to see how something works. There's a fancy word for it called reverse engineering. And I highly recommend it to beginners. Start taking stuff apart and see how it all went together, and it'll help you when you do a repair. So now I've just pulled out what looks like a Wi-Fi card, and again, because I don't have a cameraman, I'm kind of standing in front of the camera there, and it's hard for me to tell you exactly what I'm doing because I did this a while ago, but that is a Wi-Fi card, and it's got the antenna wires running up to the very top of the case. And I'm going to try and remove the top of the case, which may be easier said than done. And it's just a matter of figuring it out. Everything that went together can be taken apart. Guarantee you. You know, every lock that's ever been locked can be unlocked. And such is the case with this, but it may take a little bit of time to figure it out. And it's kind of fun. Now, if I was taking apart HP computers every day, I would have this all memorized and be doing it without even thinking. Now, the fan, interestingly enough, I'm going to remove, has Phillips head screwdrivers, as you can tell from the cordless screwdriver I'm using, the old heavy-duty DeWalt there. So HP's just got this mishmash of T10 Torx bits and Phillips screws, Phillips number 2 screw heads in the PC building process, which complicates the assembly line process, quite frankly. It adds to the cost of parts. It's just not a very smart way of mass producing a computer. You want to use as many of the same part as possible for inventory control and cost reduction purposes and training purposes for the assembly line. What I ended up doing is just disconnecting the wires from the antenna wires from the wireless card. That's what I just did there. I'm still trying to figure out where those wires are going. But in the meantime, I'm working, I think, back on the optical drive again, seeing what's holding that in. No, I'm not. I'm still working on trying to get that top lid off. So I've removed the front bezel, and the front bezel also has several sections that make it up. And I recommend you take things apart as fully as you can so that you get a great and better understanding of all individual components that, when put together, form this, like a jigsaw puzzle, they form this image or this picture. And so in this case, this bezel looks like it's all one piece, when in fact it's several pieces all snapped together. And I think, I don't know, I set that aside for some reason. Maybe I just got bored with it, and I know I'm under the clock because I'm timing how long this takes to disassemble things as quickly as possible. And apparently I found what was holding in the memory card reader, and I've removed that, stick that in the pile. Now that we'll go back to the optical drive, and that slid out no problems. And I'm going back to the top again, seeing now that I've removed those parts, if I can see other screws I couldn't see before. Clearly there's a Phillips head there, and it's going to require me to go to my office and get another tool. Well, specifically a number 1 Phillips, which is a bit narrower, because the standard number 2 Phillips, which is used on every computer build you or I will ever build, for the most part, apparently wasn't good enough for HP. Now, I'm not going to talk throughout this entire video because the whole point of this is to learn as you're doing. So I want you to learn with me. I want you to kind of figure out things as I figure them out, with the confidence that we don't have to put it back together again. So it's great to rip everything down as far as you can rip it down. But be careful not to injure yourself. It's very easy to cut yourself or to be a little too enthusiastic. However, it is one of the best ways of learning is reverse engineering. And if there's anything reusable like switches and lights or certain screws, I will keep those, and so should you. So that's how you have spare parts. And in the meantime, once you figure out how things go together, you pretty much figure out that everything more or less goes together the same, especially when it comes to how Dell does things or how HP does things versus how custom computers are built. So as you watch the video, what I want you to do is keep in mind how long it takes for me to completely disassemble the Dell computer versus the HP computer versus two custom builds. However, the second custom build was only half disassembly because it didn't have a motherboard in it, and I don't think it had a hard drive in it. But regardless of that, there'll be 4 total disassemblies that I did on this night when I filmed this. And if I put music to this, people will complain that they don't like the music's too loud, it's not their type, blah, blah, blah. So at this point, go ahead and put on whatever music you like and follow along with me and count how many tools I have to use along with how long it takes me to disassemble each computer, and keep in mind mass manufacturer versus custom build. And you decide which one you'd rather work on, which one you'd rather have, and which one you'd be most likely to take out to the desert and put bullets in.